Hi everybody, welcome back. I hope you managed to get a cup of coffee, a real cup of coffee. I know I have, much needed, and hope you're enjoying the event so far. ALTE does not work by itself. We work with our members, obviously, and we also work with other organisations and associations, and that's very important to us. And that's why we have invited some of the organisations and associations that we work with, that we collaborate with, to present here at the symposium for us. So, for example, yesterday we heard from the OECD, and later on today we'll hear from the Council of Europe. But now we're going to hear from Equals. We love Equals. We work well with them. We've had a long history with them over, I don't know, maybe 20 years or so. And I'm delighted to have Lou McLaughlin here with us this morning. So good morning, Lou. Wonderful to see you, and excited to hear about you. For people in the audience, again, please do leave your comments and your questions in the chat. And if we have time, we'll try and get to some of those at the end of Lou's presentation. So for the moment, Lou, I'm going to hand over to you to talk us through about Equals, what Equals is for people who don't know, and what's happened to you particularly in the last year or so. Okay, over to you.
Thank you very much for that. Can I just check that you can hear me okay?
Yeah, no problem. I can hear you fine.
Fantastic. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Lou McLaughlin, and I'm the Executive Director of Equals. And this presentation this morning will essentially provide a brief overview of Equals itself as an association. And we'll also take a quick look backwards as well as forwards with an update on some of the lessons learned from the ongoing COVID emergency, but through the lens of a survey which was suggested by Equals and launched by the ECML in cooperation with its PNF, which is a professional network forum of which Equals is a member. International education community. And this provision of support was an underlying driver really in our initial discussions amongst ourselves and thoughts, which led to this idea of a survey so that we could really understand the impact of the pandemic on all stakeholders within the education system. As I said, Equals is a membership association and comprised of both accredited members who go through the inspection scheme and associate members. We work at a global level, and new countries on the Equals map in the last 2 years have been Algeria, Estonia, Korea, and Slovakia as well. That was in the last 6 months. Now, in terms of our accredited members, they are those institutions who go through the inspection scheme and the accreditation process itself. You can see, hopefully you can see there, the current breakdown in terms of the single schools that we have, the international groups and chains as well, and also the university centres. Now, 59% of the members represent the language and travel industry. And the main languages within that are taught are English, French, and German. Whereas the 41%, which include university centres, offer language courses to the local clientele, and the predominant language there is English. Our associate members are national as well as international organisations that have really considerable involvement and professional achievement in the field of international education, training and language learning. And they take a real active part in the projects that we run, and they really bring a wealth of professional expertise to our network. And we have worked with a number of national associations in the development of their own quality standards, accreditation schemes, and frameworks as well. Now, Equals also extends membership to those at an individual level, and many of that cohort make up our inspectorate. And we also work quite closely with our 3 project partners. In terms of the partnerships that we do have, they are many, and we've built up and developed on our MoUs with international organisations over the years. We have participatory status as an NGO with the Council of Europe, and that's essentially to advise on language education and policy issues. We're also involved in development projects such as the CEF4 and the CEF4 companion volume, as well as the LIAM project, which was one of the most recent ones, and that's the language integration for adult migrants. Equals is a co-founder of the ECML's Professional Network Forum, and that has led us to be able to assist and advise on matters related to language education in general, and then more specifically around quality assurance linking to the accreditation that we offer. Obviously, I want to mention our long-standing partnership with ALTE. That's something that we're very proud of, because we have together developed the very first European language portfolio for adults, and it was one of the first electronic versions as well. And now that has developed through the years on various different projects, whereas at the moment we are now working jointly to create online resources to promote and certify assessment literacy. That's going to be at various levels of competence and very closely integrated with the European profiling grid that I mentioned. So watch this space for future updates that will come out about that. Now, looking towards accreditation, it's really the primary way in which language institutions anywhere in the world can demonstrate their own achievement of high internal standards. And membership of Equals is awarded after a rigorous inspection, and that's based on very transparent criteria. And a re-inspection is held every 4 years. And that process is designed to assist language centres to not just attain, but also maintain the quality standards that they have. And we provide a lot of consultancy and advice around this. That said, that's normally for those institutions that are seeking accreditation for the first time. Now, the basis for the inspection schemes then are the Equals charters, and they're the founding documents, if you like, which detail the quality standards that I referenced there. With the inspection schemes, we currently have 3 that are up and running. Now, the original scheme developed for language education centres has undergone various iterations through the years, as you would imagine. We're currently, as you can see there, at version 7.2, which has been recently revised and updated. At the beginning of 2020, we launched the scheme for higher education institutions. And that essentially was to account for the growing membership that we had in that particular area. And it reflects the differences between the private language schools and those working in higher ed. Our third scheme really is a reflection of the impact of the pandemic on our members and what they have had to do, what they have turned to in terms of trying to deliver online. So this reflection of those developments led us to finalise the inspection scheme for online providers. And we've been able to completely develop that as well as pilot it during 2020 and have now launched it. So those are the 3 schemes that we have in play at the moment. Obviously, underlying all of 3 are our values and approaches. And they underpin the accreditation process itself. And also, they're really reflective of the mission, the aims, and the goals of Equals that I referenced at the beginning. And that's really around guidance and support while working towards achieving excellence within the institution. The multilingual aspect of the accreditation scheme as well really allows for greater and open access to all and gives us that global access to members around the world. Now, with the accreditation process, you'll see that this diagram here outlines the steps that are involved as an initial process, taking us through to what would lead up to the inspection itself. The emphasis is always on the fact that accreditation and the inspection is a process. It's not just the event that happens at the end. And a key part of that is self-assessment. It's really sort of free from the pressures of external monitoring and evaluating systems. So we're working to provide a safe framework for giving and receiving feedback and then being able to act on that effectively. And that's really the start of the benchmarking process. And the whole process there, as I referenced again at the beginning, is that idea of support and consultancy that comes through each step of the way. So we're a major part of the process as well. The areas of the inspection schemes are based on the Equals quality standards. And within each of these are really detailed criteria. It's a whole school approach, as you can see there, and it really encompasses all the areas and all the stakeholders as outlined in the key areas highlighted. In terms of the cyclical nature of this and harking back to the mission and the aims, you see here we have a midterm self-assessment. And again, that's the opportunity for our members to sort of take a moment to reflect. And it's also an opportunity then for further development within that accreditation cycle itself. So we ask that all members submit a self-assessment report at the end of year 2 or beginning of year 3 of their accreditation period. The objective behind this is to encourage that continuous development and reflection against the charters and against the standards. It's also to ensure that no areas of concern have arisen on either side, and to give the possibility and opportunity that if there are areas to address, that can be done collaboratively and in a supportive manner, again, with the objective of raising those standards and maintaining those standards. Now, obviously, behind all of this, there is a hard-working team. And we have the Equals Accreditation Panel is comprised of 8 senior inspectors, along with the Director of Accreditation. And they ensure that the Equals quality standards are consistently applied. And the panel moderate all of the inspection reports that come in. They are key in the decision of the outcome of the inspection. And then that group oversee the development of the various inspection schemes, as I outlined. The inspector group themselves, we have a cohort at the moment of around 50 to 55 inspectors, and they're language education professionals with considerable managerial and international experience. And they have successfully completed training in the Equals inspection scheme. So they would carry out both initial and re-inspections over that accreditation period. Now, moving on sort of from the accreditation side of things, I want to look at the other part of Equals around training and support. And a lot of that comes through this idea of resources. So I wanted to look at the publications that are there and that are available. So the Equals publications that I want to draw attention to are the series of frameworks which are available to access on the website. The main mission, again, of Equals is that contribution to the enhancement of quality, essentially, in language learning and teaching. And so in line with this mission, the first that's listed there, the Equals framework for language teacher training and development, was designed to include these guiding principles and tools. Then in 2019, this framework was developed to produce a framework for language for academic purposes, as it felt that this was separate and needed supporting tools to go along with it. Then this year, and again, building on the mission where we identified areas that still needed further redress, which was that of management, We launched the Equals Academic Management Competency Framework, or the AMCF, designed obviously to have similar guidelines and similar principles and tools, but for managers. And this was actually launched this week on Wednesday. And all of these are available on the website for access and for download. So thus far, we've sort of had a very brief canter through an introduction to Equals. And I've touched on those aspects that have been part of our recent growth and development in response to sort of the COVID pandemic around the accreditation scheme for online providers, the new framework as well, and then others such as guidelines for online provision. So in keeping with this, let's just sort of look back and forward a little to consider the ongoing COVID emergency. Now, as I mentioned at the outset, Equals proposed establishing a survey and resulting think tanks to the ECML, who in turn, and in cooperation with the Professional Network Forum, launched a Europe-wide survey. And this was really the first insight into gathering information, exchanging views, having reflections from teachers about how they were coping with the challenges, and also then how they were looking ahead. So the survey took place in February, and some of you may actually have attended the webinar on Tuesday, which was the first insight into results from this survey. So the future of language education, lessons learned. The steering group for the initiative of the Professional Network Forum of the ECML, and this is supported by the European Commission, were 5 representatives from the PNF with 2 members from the ECML's governing board. As I mentioned, the survey was Europe-wide and it included teachers from all sectors as well as managers, administrators and trainers. And within Europe, this survey had a good geographic distribution, and it's worth pointing out there was also good coverage in terms of the demographic distribution as well. Now, at this point, I'm just going to say I do, for some reason, have one slide missing here, which is not an issue. But I'm just going to touch on various key points, and there isn't particular slides with them, and these are literally coming from the results of the survey that were out on Tuesday. So I'm just going to talk to them for a minute, and then we'll resume with the slideshow. So don't panic and think that there's some sort of a glitch there. So I was talking about the survey, and as I said, it was a real opportunity to capture the experience of the teachers during the pandemic, how it impacted them, their teaching, the students, and then challenges faced and thoughts around that for the future. So the key points that I'm just going to touch on, and there are only a few, are of particular relevance because they're specifically related to assessment. The first was asking how the pandemic affected teachers' practices or that of their institution in relation to assessment. And the main result of that was that there's been a different mixture of both continuous assessment, graded tests, and examinations. And that was about 60% of the respondents. And the total amount of respondents we're talking was 1,753. So quite a number there in terms of that coming through. And it was also worth noting that there were just under 500 comments around issues to do with assessment and testing, and this is something to be looked at further. The next point of interest was the question around what, in your view, has been the effect of the pandemic on examinations. And interesting with this one, 62% reported the reduced reliability of exams. Now, it's worth pointing out at this point that we need to sort of remember that it has to obviously be correlated with the sector, with the amount of experience held. Example being that within higher education, a comment like that is perhaps more expected or more likely compared to within the primary sector. Another thing that was looked at and question formed around it was about the cancellation of examinations, which I'm sure many of us experienced, and the effect that that would have on learner motivation. And 60% reported that learners were very demotivated as a result of this, and it impacted on them. But again, just as a point of to note, is that the detail around that is needed just to see where exactly those answers are coming from in terms of sector. And one of the final points that I want to mention was the questions relating to practice and what we see being carried forward into the future when the pandemic is over. And the comment that had the greatest degree of consensus, around 55%, was that the replacement of tests and formal exams by continuous assessment has overall had a positive effect, especially in reducing stress on learners. So this idea of balancing out formative and summative assessment is something that will be investigated and shared later. So some initial takeaways from the work completed to date is that there's an equilibrium between the positives gained so far and the challenges to be faced. The next step will be to analyse the correlations using statistics, logic trees and concordancing for outcomes, and they're going to be in the form of think tanks, a colloquium with the ECML and a publication later in the year. So to sum up, I hope that that has given you a brief, as I mentioned, canter through or an overview of Equals, and also then sort of the thoughts around the survey, which ties in with us trying to support members, linking back to our initial mission and giving resources as well. So thank you for your attention, and please feel free to contact me later. I think we've just run out of time on that one.
Lou, thank you so much. That's very interesting. And you mentioned the work that ALTE and Equals are collaborating on at the moment. And so we're really looking forward to continuing to work with you in the coming months. Thank you very much for that presentation. You're right, I'm very sorry we don't have any time for questions, but do catch Lou in the breaks if you want to talk to her. Thank you very much, Lou, again, and thank you for Equals for being with us. We've just got a few minutes now for you to, again, change rooms if you want to, or stay here if you'd like. We hear from another one of our sponsors from Yunus Emre Institute. Burak Aydin will speak to us about the statistical procedures that they are using in their test, or alternatively teleport to room 1 to hear about hybrid marking with Mark Brenchley. So just a couple of minutes and we'll begin again. Thanks.